Welcome back to another deeply fascinating knowledge session with Lieutenant General Hasnain, who is also known as a thinking warrior. Today, General Hasnain talks about the Battle of Haji Pir, which he feels is one of the very important battles of the Indian Army from tactical and leadership angle.
Now one para SF, special forces.
Yes.
He took off from there. He took off from the base, and climbed up.
And we shall also discuss Sri Lankan campaign.
The LTT was a very vicious. It is still very much in existence. I'm aware. A very vicious terrorist organization.
Hi, this is Ruchi Singh and you're watching Ruchi Singh Talks, together creating an inspired life through motivational videos, transformational interview of military personnel, thought leaders and experts. Before we get started, make sure you subscribe and click on the notification bell so that you get notified whenever there are new videos. So let's jump into it. So what according to you is the best or the most challenging military operation undertaken by the Indian Armed Forces?
From 1947 now it is 72 years.
Yes.
Lots of operations in 47, 48. Lots of operations in 1962, 65, 71. Lots of counterinsurgency operations in Kashmir. UN operations, lots of them. I think some of the great operations conducted in Sierra Leone by the Indian Army, which I think hardly anyone in India knows, but we'll talk about it someday. But I think the best known operation, of which people don't know enough perhaps, is the Battle of Haji Pir, 1965. 26th August, 27th August is the date of commencement around that time. Continued for the better part of 3 to 4 days. What is the Battle of Haji Pir? In 1965, President Ayub Khan of Pakistan, who was also a general if you remember, decided that before the Indian Army gets restructured after its defeat against the Chinese in 1962, before India gets its act together on putting up a completely new army, it is best to get India into battle and defeat it, embarrass it, and perhaps by virtue of that get hold of Kashmir. So they started with what Pakistan always starts, an attempt to get the people instigated. So in 65 it started with an operation called Operation Gibraltar. Operation Gibraltar was all about pushing in a force of people from Pakistan occupied Kashmir, many of them who were soldiers themselves, many of them who were civilians, who were trained, local people who could speak the language, go in, mix with the population of Kashmiris. And the ultimate aim was to reach Srinagar, get hold of the radio station, take over the administration and announce to the world that Pakistan has taken over Kashmir. That was the broad plan. Okay. And in the course of that, if simultaneously the Pakistan army would build up on the line of control and conduct its operations on the line of control for physically capturing Kashmir. These are the broad, I mean, in understanding it in a slightly non-military way, that was what the plan was. Now, Pakistan had been doing things right from April of 1965. They were conducting operations in Kutch in Gujarat, where operations were conducted, and we came to an agreement by about June. But by August, we found that once again Pakistan Army was instigating things in Kashmir, obviously as a part of the overall plan of Gibraltar. To offset this whole thing, this area of Haji Pir, and I think we should be able to pull out a map and probably put it up for your viewers to watch. Haji Pir is a very important area. This is a bulge. On one side is Uri. North is the Uri bulge, which is jutting out towards Muzaffarabad. And down south is the Punch bulge, which is jutting out towards a place called Rawalakot. Okay. In between these two bulges, there's a bulge which is coming towards India. Obviously, when you have two bulges going out towards Pakistan, there will be a bulge coming out into India, into Indian territory, or so-called Pakistani territory at that time. So it is all Indian territory. It's always been Indian. So that bulge is known as the Haji Pir bulge, and in the middle of that bulge is a pass. A road goes over that pass. That is the Hajipir Pass. If you have to connect Uri to Punch, then you have to go through that pass. The only thing is that Hajipir was in the hands of Pakistan. So it's still in the hands of Pakistan. So we cannot go from Uri to Punch. Otherwise, we could have gone the distance of 35-40 kilometers in a matter of an hour and a half. Today, it takes us 1.5 to 2 days to go from Uri to Punch, having to come back all the way to Jammu, or maybe come back via the new Mughal route to Rajouri and then go. So our whole intention was, this bulge was being used by Pakistan to push in a lot of these infiltrators, and as a part of Operation Gibraltar. And this operation was carried out by one of the very famous brigades of the Indian Army called 68 Infantry Brigade, commanded by a very famous personality called then Brigadier Zorawar Bakshi.
Yes.
Later on, Lieutenant General Zorawar Bakshi got a Mahavir Chakra for this operation also. He was the brigade commander, and this whole operation was Indian Army's and Western Command's very, very important operation. And it was carried out by 68 Brigade as a part of my division, which I commanded later on in Baramulla. And what they did was that the whole idea was, when you are going to take over a pass will always have two shoulders, two sides. Two shoulders will be there, and there'll be something to go through the middle. That's the pass, right? So from a layman angle, the attempt was to try and get in from both sides, right? It was a very heavily defended area, and we had these units which had been earmarked for it. But while the operation was going on and while the approach march was going on, we had this fascinating young major at that time, Major Ranjit Dayal, who later on progressed to become Lieutenant General Ranjit Dayal, the Army Commander of Southern Command, later on the Lieutenant Governor of Andaman Nicobar Islands also. Ranjit Dayal was a young major, and he looked at this opportunity, and with his company of the 1st Parachute Regiment, which is now 1 Para SF, a special force.
Yes.
He took off from there, he took off from the base, Uri, and climbed up, sought the opportunity, and managed with a few men to get onto the right shoulder of Hajipir Pass, and found that it was relatively lightly held. It was actually the forward elements which were more strongly held. The pass itself was comparatively lightly held, and he managed to go there and occupy that place.
Okay.
And expanded his foothold, and had a number of counterattacks on him, but which he repelled. And it was like a coup de main that they managed to get hold of the pass, and then the rest of the army built up on it. It was a solid operation in which, and a great achievement, because having got hold of Hajipir, strategically the line of control battle changed. Because now no longer could Pakistan, for one, they could not easily move between Rawalakot, Hajipir, Bagh, Muzaffarabad. This is the road on which most of the movement takes place on the other side. Now with the Hajipir in our hands, it was going to become very difficult for Pakistan. There's another road in the depth, but that road could also be dominated by us. We could bring artillery fire on that road, observed artillery fire. So that is why I consider that Hajipir was a classic battle from an angle of leadership, from an angle of seizing opportunities, and a tactical battle resulting in a tremendous strategic advantage.
Yes.
And that is why I consider this as, in my opinion, one of the very, very important battles. Later on, Lieutenant General Ranjit Dayal was decorated with the Mahavir Chakra also for this battle.
So then why did we give Hajipir back, which has such strategic importance, after the Tashkent agreement?
Unfortunate thing that we had to give back Hajipir in 1965 after the war ceasefire in Tashkent during the peace negotiations. We had to hand over Hajipir. Now, a lot of people question me on this and ask me, why did the Indian Army make the mistake, or why did the government make the mistake of handing over Hajipir? Why did they want to return it? And then I'm forced to explain to them that it is not that we wanted to give it back. It's not that India wanted to give it back or the government wanted to give it back. It was a military compulsion, because what had happened was that we lost a lot of territory in Akhnur, where the Pakistanis, after the Battle of Haji Pir, they came in, surprised us, and reached almost 4 kilometers short of the very crucial bridge at Akhnur, which is called the Iron Bridge. If we had left the situation as it is, Haji Pir was in our hands, and if the Pakistanis had that piece of territory which they had captured almost up to Akhnur, then in the next war, whenever it would take place, the Pakistanis would have to make one push and they would come to Akhnur. And that would strategically for us would be a disaster, because we cannot afford to lose Akhnur, we cannot afford to lose that bridge on the Chenab River, because that is the bridge which is the connectivity to Poonch and Rajasthan. So this is the reason why the government of India and the Indian Army had to hand over. In 1971, we did not attempt to capture Haji Pir. And let me tell you, today Haji Pir is probably one of the world's most heavily defended localities, probably anywhere in the world today. Pakistan has put almost huge strength, almost a brigade and a half strength, to just hold that particular pass.
Yes.
But sir, only half a Gurkha battalion can defeat 8,000 Pakistani troops like we did in 1971.
The one which happened with General Cardozo.
Yes,
I'm aware of that. Absolutely. The last Khokri charge. Actually.
Yes.
I'm so proud of our armed forces and so proud of being an army brat.
That makes two of us. Absolutely, that makes two of us.
I want to share with my audience that General Hasnain's father too was a general in the Indian Army.
Right.
Yes.
Absolutely. Same regiment, same battalion. Only thing was that yes, he originally belonged to a different battalion, 1st Garhwal Rifles, one of the oldest, very, very old battalions of the Indian Army. But he later on raised and commanded 4 Garhwal Rifles, which is the unit which I joined. And that is the unit, within 3 years of its raising, it fought the Battle of Jaswantgarh in Arunachal, that time Nifa. Got 2 Mahavir Chakras, 7 Veer Chakras, 6 Sena medals, and of course suffered a huge amount of casualties and became one of the units which won a battle honor in 1962. Only 2 units of the Indian Army got battle honors in 62. One was 4 Garhwal, my unit, and the other was 13 Kumaon at Razangla. We will talk about these some other day.
Me and my audience will love to know more about it. So you're from St. Stephen's, and very few people from St. Stephen's joined the army, but you did.
Interestingly, perhaps your viewers may like to know that very rarely has St. Stephen's produced general officers of the Indian Army.
Yes.
Or any army. But they produced, the first general that they really produced from St. Stephen's was General Ziaul Haq of the Pakistan Army. Right?
Yeah.
After that, they had 1 or 2 other generals of the Indian Army, but I was perhaps the 3rd, 4th, maybe 5th general from St. Stephen's College.
Yes.
Thank you, sir, for letting us have a glimpse of your life, which many don't know of. So since we are on the topic of military operations of Indian Army, I wanted to ask about another campaign. Was it a good decision to send soldiers to help the Sri Lankan government, as more than 1,200 Indian soldiers were martyred? And what did India gain out of it?
That's a very contextual question to today, because you've had the elections in Sri Lanka and you find the return of the Rajapaksas, and a lot of strategic analysts are saying that India may have lost out its influence once again, because Rajapaksas are very pro-Chinese and things like that. That should give your viewers the indication that one thing is very certain, that Sri Lanka is for us a very strategically very important.
Yes.
Southern tip of India, an island country. We have to remember that 80% of the world's trade goes through the Indian Ocean, just south of Sri Lanka. And any country, particularly a large country like China, the United States itself, anyone will want to have a facility in Sri Lanka, on the coast of Sri Lanka, a harbor, a port, in some way or the other, by which it can use that facility to project its influence into the Indian Ocean. Remember, from if you look at the map, from the Persian Gulf till the Straits of Malacca, there's a clean run of the Indian Ocean, and it's clearly divided in the middle by the Indian subcontinent and Indian peninsula, which goes down, and at the tip of it is Sri Lanka. So from a geostrategic angle, Sri Lanka is a very, very important country. But it has got a Tamil minority. This Tamil minority was created primarily because of the British system of taking a tremendous amount of South Indian Tamil labor into Sri Lanka, primarily into the tea plantations. And from there we have a huge ethnic population of Tamils who are located there. And this has led to a different set of political differences between both the community, the Sinhala community, which is essentially Buddhist or Christian, the Tamil community, which is essentially Hindu or Christian, many of them Muslims, right? So it has led to all kinds of differences between them. And even in a small country like Sri Lanka, somehow they have not been able to come to solutions on these differences. Look at India. India, the size of India, right? You can say that there will be differences of opinion between people with a number of communities, number of languages, number of religions that we have. In Sri Lanka, it should have been simpler, but it's not going to be achieved. So when in late 70s and 80s, when the Tamil population rose up against the Sri Lankan government, it was primarily because the Tamils had not been treated equitably. They had not been given their due, and as regular citizens of Sri Lanka, they needed to be on board with them, with the government, to be given all the privileges which are given to the majority community of the majority people of Sri Lanka. Somehow all this was not that done. It all led to a tremendous amount of tension and the creation of a militant force, which a number of militant forces, with the most prominent of them were the Liberation Tigers of Tamil Eelam, the LTT, and a charismatic personality like Prabhakaran, who rose and created an aura about himself and created a very well trained and a very well motivated force. Now, a lot of people will criticize India for the allegation that India actually trained the LTT. I cannot confirm, I cannot counter that allegation, but I will always say, yeah, that the LTT was a very, very vicious, is a very vicious, it is still very much in existence, I'm aware, a very, very vicious terrorist organization. India did not want anyone else to come to Sri Lanka, to the aid of Sri Lanka, to assist it in its civil war against the LTT. Because if you allow anyone else to come, obviously in a sensitive area, the influence of that country would enhance. So that is the reason why India chose to go itself. And when this war had gone on for fairly long, in 1987, finally, India managed to broker a peace accord between the Sri Lankan government and the LTT. Somehow we were our experience on handling peace, handling negotiations, etc., was not of a very high order. And therefore, whatever was brokered politically was not stable enough. And we sent in just a peacekeeping force. Essentially, a peacekeeping force does not go heavily armed. It takes its personnel there, does not take every piece of equipment with it. We went primarily that we are not fighting anyone, we are only keeping people apart.
Yes.
That was the whole idea behind it. But the LTT proved to be a very awkward kind of an organization, and when they realized that the Indian Army was asking them to hand over their weapons, it could possibly lead to a situation where the LTT, if tomorrow something develops against them, they would not be in a position to fight back. So they started resisting the handing over of that.
Yes.
Now the assessment by the army, by the government of India, by the intelligence agencies at that time was that in 3 to 5 days' time we'll be able to disarm the whole entity. And then once they are disarmed, They will be able to put them into certain cantonments and train them for better citizenship duties, and there would be peace all over Sri Lanka. That was a very idealistic kind of a way of looking at things, because you can't trust militant and terrorist organizations like this. And Sri Lanka and the LTT was a deeply terrorist-oriented organization. So yes, we went wrong in our assessment, we went wrong in our intelligence, we went wrong in our concept of operations. We, after the entity refused to hand over weapons, we started going into forcible disarming, which led to standoffs, and then we went into all-out battle against them. And we lost, as you say, 1,200 soldiers. 1,200 soldiers is a large number for any nation to lose, and that was it hit us. We were there for almost 2.5 years from July of 1987 till 21st of March 1990. At the end of the day, I think what happened was that we weakened the LTT a lot. We weakened the LTT a lot. We gained a lot of intelligence about the LTT, which we shared with the Sri Lankan army. It was a very awkward thing because the LTT somehow had a lot of backing from within our own territories in southern India.
Yes.
So in many cases, we were fighting the LTT, and injured LTT terrorists were being transported from there to the hospitals in Tamil Nadu and being treated there. This is one of the most awkward situations.
Yes.
Where you are targeting someone and in your own hospital that person is being treated. So yes, it was a misjudgment. See, it was a strategic misjudgment. But I really don't blame anyone for it, because I think it takes a tremendous amount of experience to make nations mature into understanding these kind of things. And that is why I always say that India, the big lesson, takeaway lesson for us should always be that our strategic culture is very weak. Our public is not sufficiently aware and sensitive of strategic issues. Thankfully, a lot of departments have opened up in different universities on defense studies, but you only have academic people who are teaching all that. People who don't have experience who are teaching that. We need a lot of, I think we need a lot of give and take between the academic world of defense studies and the armed forces of India. And that best way that can happen is by the setting up of the National Defense University, which I hope in the near future will be set up.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your knowledge with us. I hope this college comes in existence very soon. My interview on Indian Army is my tiny initiative to bridge the knowledge gap. Thank you so much, sir. I feel happy sharing your knowledge with the public. Want to know more about our military history? Then you are in luck, as in the next video, General Hasnain will share some books which we can read to know more about our military history. Please like, share and subscribe if you haven't already, and come back for the next video. Till then, meditate, breathe right and smile your way through life. Thank you so much.